Today we're not only talking about one, but actually two changes that came to the game in patch 4.23. The buffs to both Hydras Lament and Jotunns Wrath. And to put a little spoiler ad here, these changes that we see will probably change the usage of certain items, how often they're bought and how effectively they can be used. So I think this one, especially if you're using these items, if you're playing ability-based assassins, or maybe even hunters that use any of these items, then you should be paying attention here, because this could be very important for you. As both of these items kind of fall in the same category, are mostly built by the same characters, and have a similar function, I figured it would be worth to just touch up on both at the same time, make a direct comparison, pull in some other items along with them, and get our results that way. First of all, what were the changes and why? Hydras Lament increased bonus basic attack damage from 30% to 40%. Hydras actually added a whole lot of reasoning to this one. Assassins that are more damage-oriented have been pushed out in favor of tankier options. While nerfs to items like Titan's Bane helped bring warrior and hunter damage into a more fair spot, they did affect assassins as a side result. Nerfs to items like Gladiator's Shield and Jade Emperor's Crown will also help in this regard, but we want to bring up the overall power of being aggressive with assassins. Hydras Lament is a strong boost to assassins who can weave basic attacks in between their abilities. Assassins who benefit from this item will get an extra punch that will help them burst down squishy mages and hunters more effectively. Likewise, Jotunns Wrath got a cost reduction from 2,450 to 2,350, so 100 gold less. Jotunns Wrath is getting a cost reduction which will help ability-based assassins to become more threatening quicker. While warriors can make use of this level of cooldown reduction, the need to sacrifice a tankier item to fit this in will push them in a more defensive or offensive choice, which is a serious trade-off and creates healthy choices for that class. This is very correct. Most warriors don't typically build Jotunns Wrath, and when they do, it leaves them a lot more squishy. So overall, this is definitely more of a buff for assassins, except for maybe the very low tier games where you often see warriors build Jotunns Wrath as well. While I don't believe that these are the be-all end-all changes for assassins and they won't need any further buffs afterwards, it also kind of doesn't really cover the basic attack assassins yet, I do still think that these changes will be helpful for assassins and that they can bring us a lot of benefits. But to not just talk about my feelings, let's actually look into the numbers. In order to make a useful comparison here, we will use a level 10 Hun bot, somebody who can make use of both items, and we'll put him just against the level 1 Odin bot. The reason for doing that is because the Odin bot has sufficient protections to work against all these items and still have some protections after. There will always be mitigated damage, so the damage values we have at the end are comparable. In a real fighting scenario, you might deal less damage, but the overall output would be comparable, like the ratio between the items wouldn't change, and that's what we're looking into here. In order to compare, we need first of all Jotunns Wrath and Hydras Lament, the new items, or the changed items rather, and then we have one item to evaluate the two against other ones, and that one is Brawler's Beatstick. Now Brawler's Beatstick recently got a price increase because it was a bit too expensive. It's typically known as the highest damaging of the early assassin items, with the trade-off that it doesn't have any cooldown reduction. We'll get into the item effects a little later. Let's first talk about the items and their damage values. We have the gold price, which is Jotunns 2,300, Brawlers 2,300, and Hydra 200 gold cheaper with 2,150. What I did was using every ability on the Odin bot, including the basic attack or the amplified Hydras Lament basic attack, and that way collect all the damage values that I need. In order to make them more comparable, I would then add them up. First of all, I made a combo of using the 1, a basic, the 2, a basic, the 3, a basic. So 1, 2, 3 and 3 basic attacks. In that order, you would get the amplification from Hydras Lament on every single ability, so that's the ideal use for it. What you can already see here is that obviously the damage numbers with Jotunns are a little bit higher than Hydras, as Jotunns has penetration while Hydras doesn't, and Brawler's damage values are even higher than that because Brawler's has higher penetration. The damage disparity is higher on abilities that have a higher ranking, obviously, as it does more damage that way, has higher base values that benefit from penetration. So what you see on the 2 is up to 46 damage difference, as there were 5 points in this ability, whereas the 1, which only 1 point was invested into, had a maximum damage difference of 14. The build included Bluestone Pendant, Warrior Tabi, and one of the 3 items, so this was specifically a comparison for your first item slot. Therefore, level 10 makes sense, and therefore this is approximately the level on which your abilities would be. So if you would deal more damage with penetration later, for example, it doesn't matter all that much, because later into the game you will also have items that offer penetration. On the other hand, a basic attack with Hydra's Steroid would deal 182 compared to the 142 of Jotun's Wrath and the 149 of Brawler's Beatstick, so 33 to 40 damage more with a single basic attack, applying for everyone that you use an ability before. The total damage with the combo comes down to 1062 for Jotun's Wrath, 1129 for Hydras Lament, and 1113 for Brawler's Beatstick. Doing the same comparison but including the ult and another basic, so 1, 2, 3, 4 and 4 basics in between, we get 1429 damage for Jotun's, 1516 for Hydras Lament, and 1497 for Brawler's Beatstick. That's a whole lot of numbers. What can we tell from this? As you can see, the damage difference between Hydras Lament with properly used basic attacks and Brawler's Beatstick is relatively minor. We talk about damage differences of less than 20 for the overall combo, so that's not very impressive. Jotun's Wrath, on the other hand, falls off a little bit, 70-ish to 80-ish damage difference to Hydras alone. That, if you ask me, is nothing that should be undervalued. Especially not when it also comes with a 200 gold price difference. Yes, Hydras and Brawlers pretty much go even, and Brawlers has the benefit of being more efficient for AoE abilities that hit multiple enemies because of the penetration, but it's also 200 gold more expensive, and in the early game 200 gold can be quite a chunk. But when talking about these items, we can hardly disregard the other effects on them. For Hydras Lament, that is 10% cooldown reduction. Not too bad, it used to be 15% once upon a time, very good stat for those who can benefit from it, definitely something worth investing to. But not the only thing this item offers. The secondary passive is something people often tend to forget about, and I think for junglers it is actually very strong. This item grants a 2.5 MP5 per 10% of your missing mana. So this stacks up, and the more mana you lose, the less mana you have, the more MP5 you will get. This item without a doubt will give you the best sustain in regards to mana in the jungle, as you will always get more MP5 when you get low, and this will mean that you can stick around quite long in general, due to the fact that you can heal up quite easily from camps with Bamba's Mask anyways, so if you're a character that even has the mildest mana problems or burns a fair bit of mana, then Hydras Lament gets an extra bonus here on top. Jotun's Wrath, while being a bit more expensive and having a bit less damage, gets 20% cooldown reduction, so an extra 10% on top of that. A very valuable stat, 200 gold more, depending on the god, can be worth it. In addition to that, you also get 150 flat mana, will allow you to stick around the jungle a little longer, though not nearly as long as Hydras Lament allows you to. Brawler's Beatstick gets the extra benefit of having 40% healing reduction. In situations where that's needed, it can be very beneficial, but there are also a fair few situations where you can just afford building it a little bit later, as early on healing typically isn't quite as crazy. If you previously were primarily using Brawler's Beatstick for early damage because you just wanted the highest damage numbers, and your character also makes decent benefit of the passive from Hydras Lament, then I do think making the switch and prioritizing Hydras Lament over Brawler's Beatstick is worth it quite often now. You get extra CDR, extra MP5 in the jungle, and you have extra damage against a single target if you cancel properly. The damage numbers for Hun Batz aren't the only ones that we can look at, and some other gods will paint a bit of a different picture. The more damage scaling you have in your abilities and the more base damage they have, the better the penetration items become, so Thor or Susanoo would probably get significantly more damage out of Jotun's Wrath than Hun Batz can. As such, I wouldn't always just straight up prioritize Hydras Lament. Jotun's Wrath can also be the way to go if you want to go more ability based, if you maybe want to range poke more and not go as much into the fray with basic attacks. There are enough reasons to build Jotuns. On some gods though, I would prioritize Hydras Lament in almost any situation now. For example, Hun Batz, as if you crit, which is in his passive, you get an additional 80 bonus damage over what you would deal with Jotuns on that very crit through the amplification. That is something that is ridiculous in early game and you don't want to miss out on that. Also on that G, the item should have a lot more benefit than before now. Previously, I wouldn't necessarily advise for it as you often get more out of the ultimate, but now the quick 3-1 combo will deal so much damage with Hydras that I would probably consider it quite often. So overall, Hydras definitely gained a lot of value with this buff. It definitely is more of a competitor to the others, while Jotunns also gets the added benefit of being a little cheaper and now being more on an even level with brawlers overall, depending on if you prefer a little bit more damage and anti-heal or CDR and a bit of mana. And with that, thank you guys for watching. I hope this was insightful and gave you a bit more of an understanding of how good the items are in comparison now. If you're not subscribed yet, feel free to click the sub button and maybe the bell, it really helps me out. Comment of the day goes to JHLBJA. Bellrite is a great free-to-play game. I think everyone should give it a go regardless of all this Paladins pay-to-win drama. Short and to the point, I like that. Thank you for that comment. See you guys for the next one tomorrow. DukeSloth, out.